Hey guys, I wanted to show you something I found today that I'm very excited about. It's a rare collectible that I don't always get a chance to get my hands on of late, either because of the price or just because I don't. But yes, you can see what it is in front of you. It is a Rifleman original script. And let me tell you a little bit about the story of how I got it and who it used to belong to. So this script came from an estate sale, and now we have a local senior complex near us that has a lot of sales, and I don't go to a lot of them because there's so many reasons why I don't go to them. But this one, she noted, and I'm so thankful that she did, in the headline that it was the home of a TV writer. And a lot of times, they don't say things like that. And I discovered I went to one once before that turned out to have been the home of a writer, and I found that out totally accidentally. But this one, so she mentioned it. So my first concern was, oh my gosh, people are going to beat down the door. I am never going to get anything. So this woman, who was Pat Fielder, oh gosh, I'm going to say it now wrong. Let me just double check to make sure I'm saying it right. And Pat Fielder, yes. So Pat Fielder, who was Patricia Fielder, but she went by Pat, I'm sure, so they could kind of disguise the fact that she was a woman, probably. From IMDb says she was a theater arts graduate from UCLA, and she started working for independent production company Levy Gardner and Levin, which you'll see Jules Levy and Gardner are the producers of Rifleman. So she started working for them in the 50s. And she convinced them to give her a shot at writing. And she made several horror films. She wrote the Western Geronimo, which I think also had Chuck Connors. She wrote a bunch of episodes of The Rifleman. And she also, though, wrote through her career. This is back in the day when people freelanced and you didn't have to be on staff. Let me just tell you some of the other shows she wrote. Oh, she also wrote Law of the Plainsman. Oh my gosh, that was one of my favorite movies, TV shows that no one ever shows. But she wrote the screenplay for The Monster That Changed the World, Return of Dracula, Rifleman. Then she wrote Dr. Kildare, Wagon Train, Ben Casey, High Chaparral, Matt Lincoln, Alias Smith and Jones. I'm a huge Alias Smith and Jones fan, and I have a love-hate relationship with the episode she wrote, which is called The Posse That Wouldn't Quit. And if you're an Alias Smith & Jones fan, you will know it as It's a Gift to Be Simple, It's a Gift to Be Free. Yeah, that one. She also wrote Marcus Welby, Banachek, Policewoman, Charlie's Angels, Macmillan and Wife, a whole lot of Berettas. She worked there quite a bit. Starsky and Hutch, Quincy, BJ and the Bear, Sheriff Lobo, Fantasy Island, Love Boat. And the last thing she wrote in the 80s was a sci-fi movie called Goliath Awaits. So a really super working writer. I mean, she wrote from the early 60s all the way through the 70s. So Pat, although she did, so here's where it gets a little weird. So I went to this estate sale assuming that I was going to be able to find a lot of TV stuff, scripts, paperwork. I love paper. I love call sheets, all that kind of stuff. And I was really disappointed because there wasn't. The only thing they had was a nice display of the script for Goliath Awaits with the poster and a bunch of other pieces that they wanted a lot more money for than I could handle. I'm sure it was a very reasonable price. It was like a big production binder, but it was out of my price range, especially on a movie that I didn't know. And so I asked the person running the sale that I know from other sales, and I explained the situation, and she said, I might have something. But she expressed that the family, or the people in charge of the estate, had, if I'm understanding properly, had kept back a lot of the scripts. And I'm assuming maybe because they either donated them to, like she went to UCLA, maybe they donated them to UCLA, or they were going to put them up for sale or sell them to a collector or a dealer as one big lot. I know people get rid of things over the years, but I find it hard to believe that she got rid of all her scripts. So I imagine they're somewhere in the family. This one was still around. And the reason I think that she had this one to sell is that, as you can see here, I know it doesn't focus well, is Pat didn't write this one. This was actually written by Sam Peckinpah, which, if you know anything about movie history, This is the famous Sam Peckinpah who went on to be a huge director. But he was writing a little bit for television back in 1958. If you get that there. December 2nd, 1958. I wasn't even born yet. This script is older than me. Not by much, but it is. It does say up here whose script this was, but I can't get it from the way it's written. I don't think that says Pat or Fielder in any way. What it looks like is it was written to go to someone and they maybe crossed it out. And what I'm thinking is that Pat started writing for them after 1958. So I bet you this was a script that she was either given or asked for to get the feel of the Rifleman before she started writing for them. And so that would totally make sense, because then this would be pre her starting. She would have read through this, and then I said that's why the family didn't keep it, because it wasn't actually one of hers. But can we talk about this cover? Now, sadly, like I said, there's some marks over here, which actually kind of almost blend in from how you're looking at it. Back in the day, it was really common to put image covers like these, good, thick covers, cardstock covers on scripts with great imagery. Irwin Allen, who we collect, had great covers on his. Not everybody did. And later into the years, once you get out of the 60s into the 70s, they stopped doing it. Obviously, I think it was expensive. It was expensive. It wasn't necessary. And they stopped doing this. But this is amazing to me. Now, I am a Rifleman fan. I used to watch it religiously. I've probably seen every episode several times. And I'm a big fan of Johnny Crawford. One of the reasons being that right around the time I was born, Johnny Crawford released a song called Cindy's Birthday. And I always thought he wrote that song for me, because it came out like the week of my birthday. So, yes, thank you, Johnny. And I'm also a big Chuck Connors fan. I've seen him in lots and lots and lots of things. I do adore him. And then you can see it was the old 4-star studios, which I don't have the history off the top of my head, but 4-star was a big Western studio, and they did other things too, but then they went out of business, and they were down in Hollywood. So, like I said, I'm going to do a little more digging to this episode and see if I can't figure out who that was there. So this episode was called The Boarding House, and it's, again, on a quick, I don't remember it off the top of my head. I did a little quick look, and my understanding is it's a story about a woman who starts a boarding house, lovely woman, she's making a living, and someone comes along who recognizes her from her former jaded past and threatens to out her if she doesn't help them, like turn the place into a cheap gambling establishment or something like that. So Lucas and Mark are staying there. This is so funny. I don't know if you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen me talk about this, and I don't think I'm going to get enough focus for you to tell. One day I'm going to get a camera that focuses. Sorry. I find it really interesting. If you can see this, it says McCain, that they don't refer to Lucas in the script as Lucas. They do refer to Mark, obviously, as Mark, because he is Mark McCain. But I think that's a very sort of old school thing, to call men by their last name. But I am surprised in the script. The other thing I wanted to say was, as I was doing my research, several women wrote scripts for Rifleman under names that made it look like it was men. And I almost wonder if, they thought that men didn't want to watch a Western that was written by a woman. But Rifleman has so much heart and is so much in the relationship between the father and son that I think maybe that's where a lot of that heart came from. I don't know how many female writers they had on staff, but they did a great job. I do need to go back and look at Pat's episodes and see if there are ones that I recognize, because I know some of them well, but not all of them. There's a lot of them. But this is a really funny exchange. They're having dinner with the guests at the boarding house, and Mark says to one of the women, "You didn't clean your plate, lady." There's a moment of silence. Awkward. They all turn to Mark, and the woman says, "After we're better acquainted, you may call me Miss Agnes." Mark, indicating her plate, "If you pulled a trick like that out at the ranch, it'd be Miss Mud." Woo! The group freezes, and McKay and Lucas almost strangling on a mouthful of food. "And I'm afraid your manners need some considerable improvement." And Mark is told to, basically warned off. hold on one second. Let me shut that phone off. There we go. And he says, "No harm meant, Miss Agnes Hamilton. Only my pa says letting good food go to waste is criminal. What with starving people all over, we got no time to be finicky." And so she's like, "I understand. We'll just forget about it." But Mark is not done. "Pa had to take a belt to my britches for her. I understood. But I figure if you was to finish your dinner, he wouldn't do anything. You being female and kind of old and all." And that's actually a typo, because it would be if you didn't finish your dinner, not if you did. And of course, the whole group is like aghast that he not only chastised this woman, but called her old. Lucas McCain stands swiftly, taking Mark by the ear, lifts the boy out of the seat. Mark yelps, then his eyes bulging, is propelled by his father out of the dining room and through a side door. Over the following can be heard the sounds of spanking and Mark's yelping protests. "But Pa, I was trying to. What about those starving folks in Europe? What about them? She didn't even clean her plate." And I also think it's really funny that they refer to starving children in Europe. When I was a child, that line was being used quite often by family members, but they would say they're starving children in Africa. I don't know that when I was a kid, we thought people were starving in Europe. I'm sure there were people starving all over the world, but Europe wasn't the place that really came to mind. I also don't think that historically in the 1800s, when this show is set, you probably had to warn children about cleaning their plate with threats of, there's starving people in other parts of the world. I imagine they didn't get that much to eat and probably ate everything was put in front of them, but maybe not. Kids are kids. So anyway, so it's really cool. The other thing I will say that kind of surprised me about the script, we do own quite a few old scripts, and you kind of can tell from the paper when you're trying to tell if something is old. You can tell from the paper when it's really old. You can actually see the typewriter, because back in the day, into the 50s and really into the early 60s, they had typing pools that were typing these out. And again, remember, no copiers, no computers back then, so everything had to be hand typed. And so it almost felt a little too good a condition. The pages are all pink, which is hard to tell, I know, from the lighting here. They look orange, but they are pink. And again, if you're not familiar with how scripts work, different drafts, the draft number, which on most scripts is down here in this corner, each color represents a change to the story. So say, they were going along, and before they got to this scene 22, they decided to eliminate, without even meaning to, open back up to the same page here. Let's just not drive you all crazy. Let's go to a different page. Here's Micah, the other favorite character from the show. So let's say they decided to get rid of this scene with Micah and Liz. And so they would print the new scene on a new color page, so say blue, and then hand that out to all the actors to put in their scripts. So when they got here, this page would be rewritten in blues. This part would be the same, and then here it would say omitted, and then it would continue. And by doing this, you made sure everybody always had the right page. Because you imagine if you made the changes to the same color, now you're like, the actor's reading, but the director's going, hey, that's not what my script says, and who's got the new script? I don't know. So each revision would be noted as a revision in a different color, and that way you could, if the actor's not reading the lines you think he should be saying, you could say, are you on the blue pages? And he'd be like, no, I'm on the pink pages. Well, there's your problem, because you're reading the old pink pages, and we've changed. So again, because this one's all pink, either this was the very first one out the door, or this was the final where everything was on pink. I would imagine it was probably the first, an earlier draft. If we assume the first draft is on white, I'm guessing, and then would go to pink as the next draft. So what I was trying to say is when I was handed this, it almost felt, these pages, not the cover, but the inside pages, almost felt too clean and crisp to actually be from 1958. The cover, absolutely. You can tell they don't make covers like this anymore. People who copy scripts don't copy onto the same kind of paper. It's got the stains that somebody dumped something on it. They have writing that's on here. There's no question to me that this was an original. And the more, look, it has to be. Again, there's no reason she would have had a copy of a script. Now, it might have been a file copy or something that someone typed and gave to her, but it is an original from the era, from the studio. So that's my little piece of history that I'm so excited to have. I will just, because I do sell a lot of things, value-wise, it's really hard to pinpoint. There are no Rifleman scripts listed on eBay now or having sold in the last few months. There is one out on WorthPoint, but I don't have access to that, so I don't know what it sold for. I did see another one listed on another site for about $200. So I would imagine, again, it would probably have value in the $200, $250 range. Maybe because it's a Sam Peckinpah episode, it would be more or less. If I could figure out whose script this was from up here, that would also help give it more value. The fact that it came from Pat also adds value, but I have no proof of that, once again, since it's not hers. I will probably add a note to it just in case at some point in the future when I'm not on this earth any longer, someone will know the provenance of where this came from, because to me that's really, really important. And I want to show you one more thing before I sign off with you. Another thing I picked up at that sale, it's the only other thing really that was related to Pat's career, was this fantastic Burbank Studios dish. I have to laugh. Somebody has this, again, not on eBay, but somebody does have one listed on a collectible site for very little money, which really surprises me because this is from probably the 70s, at the very latest, the early 80s. You know what? I'm actually going to say 80s because she was working on Goliath Awaits in the 80s, and this is probably the studio they were at. This is basically Burbank Studios with this logo. This was back Columbia Pictures and Warner Brothers. So you see it says Columbia Pictures, home of Warner Brothers. Oh, sorry, you got to read it this way. Home of Warner Brothers and Columbia Pictures. So they together got that studio in Burbank, which is why it's Burbank Studios. And this was the original logo for their combined studio. Columbia Pictures was bought out and eventually left Warner Brothers, and they took over and renamed the studio Warner Brothers. So the studio that you see now in Burbank, that is Warner Brothers Studio, is the same place with much more land. It's expanded. But this is the logo from the 70s and early 80s, because I think they kept it, when the two studios were housed under the same roof. So I love this logo in the center. It's, especially if you see it done in color from the 70s, it's really poppy and funny. It's it looks like a pewter piece. It looks like it was designed to hang, I don't know how you would hang that on a wall. I guess you could hang it that way, or I don't know. It's got a little hook here, like it was designed to go with something. And it's got this very expensive looking crest into it. Must be the maker's mark from the person who made it. But, it's a pewter piece. It needs some cleanup, which my husband's going to take care of. It's got some issues, but we can deal with that. And this is going to go into our collection of TV, movie memorabilia because we really love things from this era, that 70s, 80s era at the studios. So those are my two finds. I was hoping to come back with a whole lot more to show you, but sadly these were the only things. The only other thing, and I kind of now wish I had picked it up, but I didn't because I got all involved in the script discussion. There was a blank set of what they call Day Out of Days, which is a form that like assistant directors and directors use to notate what actors work on what days. These days, of course, they're all done by computer and printed out on a computer. But back at then, you did them by hand and filled out this form. And she had a blank pad of these, but had them priced a little higher than I expected for what they were. But I was kind of dumb. I probably should have grabbed that as well. As it was, I probably spent more than I had intended on these two items. But I thought, when am I going to get a chance, to get another, real Rifleman script from... Like I said, even if she didn't write it, she owned it from the woman who worked on the show, from this woman whose career made a career out of writing for television, which is something I always dreamed I would do. But I think I've probably passed the point of that dream happening. I've done a lot of other things I had hoped to do, but I think that one is not in my future, shall we say. So that's it. I am going to sign off here with my Rifleman and my Burbank Studios. If you have any thoughts about either of these, or you have any knowledge of their history or anything else you want to tell me about these things, I would love to hear it.